What's good, Savages? Welcome to another episode of Blue Collar Sports. I'm Savage Paulson, and with me, as always, the sports savant of Blue Collar Sports, Zach McGibbon. What's going on, Gibby?
Really liking these intros.
I was trying to come up with something. I was like, what can I come up with today?
I like that too. It's a nice combo of names there, all put together. But no, I'm excited. It's been a little bit, but a lot has happened since we last spoke, and really excited to break it down with you today.
Yeah, I'm kind of happy we skipped a week last week because, man, I did horrible on my divisional picks. Was it wild card? It was wild card picks.
It was the wild card picks.
Holy shit, man. I was like, all right, there's a few of these picks that are kind of out there. I knew the Steelers were going to have a tough time. I got it, but they're my team. But after Saturday, I was so dejected. I was like, Sunday after the first game, I was like, I can't. I think it was the Broncos game that broke me. I was like, This is the last straw. Like, if I could just get this upset pick, I'll be like, I don't care about the other ones.
Well, I gotta tell you that Broncos game when that deep ball that Bo Nix threw, I'm like, oh my god, Stefan's gonna get that one right. Like,
right.
As soon as that first deep ball happened, I was like, oh my god. But then, of course, it's the Bills at home, and it's like they remembered they were a playoff team and what they're supposed to be, and now here we are, right? So
it's like that fighter that needs to get punched in the face.
Yes.
To wake up, he gets like a Cowboy Cerrone style guy. Like, let me get punched in the face for 1.5 rounds, and then after that, I could just knock you out. It was so I'm kind of glad I got over it last week. I didn't really make any picks, even if I was just by myself last week. We had some good football. I'm happy with where we're at, and we'll get to talk about it later on in the show. But I want to start here. On January 1st, Ben Johnson was hired as the new head coach of the Chicago Bears. He became their 18th head coach in franchise history, including 3 in the Hall of Fame. Can you name those 3? If you know the 3, hit us up in the comments, see if you can guess the 3 Hall of Fame. The former Lions offensive coordinator had a big part in turning the Detroit Lions in a winning franchise. Now he becomes the Chicago Bears head coach. His new number 1 weapon is Caleb Williams. Zach, my question is, can Ben Johnson give the Chicago Bears some long-term success?
Boy, it's something that Chicago kind of needs. And, this is a team in Chicago that their whole identity just throughout the entirety of the franchise, going back to really the 80s, has been their defense and how strong they are. But they could never find that quarterback that can really take them over the top. When your best quarterback, arguably in franchise history, is Jay Cutler, you've got some problems going on in that organization, and Jim McMahon being the guy to take you to a Super Bowl, right? And so they've got probably one of the most talented in terms of on the field guys in Caleb Williams that's on their team. This is the most talented quarterback they probably ever had. And so
in franchise history, you think he's the most talented one?
In franchise history, absolutely.
Right.
In terms of the physical traits, the physical gifts that he has, this is the most talented. And so this is an opportunity for the Bears to try and really harness into that. So obviously, as you know, there's a difference between having like the raw ability and the raw talent and then molding it together to be a good football player.
Right.
And one of the big things with Caleb Williams is because he has this arm talent that no one really else has. There was a lot of times in college that he would force the ball downfield. He would have these video game like throws where, yes, it would be like these 60-yard, 70-yard deep bombs downfield, but then he would do that in scenarios where it's like, oh, it's 2nd and 6, you just need a couple yards to gain for the first down, and he's saying, no, I gotta, F it, we're going deep, right? Like, you can't have that mentality all the time, especially in the NFL. So there were flashes of ability from Caleb Williams this past year, and so they had to go out there and get somebody like a Ben Johnson who was able to maximize that offense in Detroit. He was able to maximize the ability of Jared Goff. He has the receivers there in Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams and the 2 great running backs there, mainly Jahmyr Gibbs in Detroit. And so he was able to utilize all that, and it turned into one of, if not the top offense in the NFL this past year. Obviously didn't translate into a Super Bowl appearance like they were hoping for. And it is kind of a Lions way to go where You know, they have all this hype coming in and everybody's excited, and it's just losing to the Commanders in the divisional round. Obviously not something that they wanted to do, but I think this is a really smart move for the Bears. Obviously, Ben Johnson has been somebody that's been very decisive on where he wanted to go, and I think he sees the talent there, and I think there is talent there on offense in Chicago that he can work with. And so I think that offense will improve, and I've already seen some of the names that are being floated about on his coaching staff that he's bringing in, and I like some of the names that he's bringing in too. I can tell you, as obviously a Cowboys fan, we'll talk about my Cowboys in a few and their hiring choices. I certainly have some things to say about that. But one of the people that was on the Cowboys staff, Al Harris, who I don't know if that name resonates, but he used to be a defensive back in the 2000s. He played for the Packers for a long while, and he was the defensive backs coach for the Cowboys. And he was somebody that helped get guys like Trayvon Diggs into an all-pro caliber defensive back. And so that's a coach that's coming to Chicago that's going to be on Ben Johnson's coaching staff. So I like the staff that he's put together there. I like the weapons that are there in Chicago already. I'm very fascinated to see what the play calling will be in Chicago, but I think this is a really smart decision by Chicago to bring in a guy like Ben Johnson.
Do you think they have enough offensive weapon to be successful immediately under Ben Johnson? Because I understand his offensive mind and the success he had with the Detroit Lions. And I believe that you believe that Caleb Williams is a better athlete than Jared Goff. Would you say he's a better quarterback at this point in his career?
Probably not,
Right.
not yet. I think if the trajectory goes right and he develops the right way, I think he could be leagues above Jared Goff. And I like Jared Goff. He's a guy that I think he got a bad shake when he left the Rams many years ago, and he was the guy that was deemed it's because of McVay's success, right? But he was able to.
I agree with that. I thought Jared Goff had the shaft when it showed immediately when he was under the right leadership in Detroit. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I do agree with that Jared Goff definitely got the bad end of the stick when it came to the LA Rams, and you could see it now, and I'm happy for him. I love him. I love him as a quarterback, as a leader for that team.
Yeah, and sometimes that's just what you need. You see that in the NFL a lot with a lot of these guys, is sometimes a new environment could do so much for a guy,
right,
and makes it to their maximum ability. And so, Jared Goff, I think with good coaching, I mean, he was a first overall pick for a reason, right? He has the talent and the skills.
Right.
But I think in terms of the ability that he has, he's one of the more talented quarterbacks I've seen, again, just from a physical skill set that I've seen in a while. It's all about harnessing that together and putting it into this mold that you can trust him to be your franchise guy. And in order to do that, Chicago has to shed that defense first mindset that they've had for the longest time. Their previous coach, Matt Eberflus, was a defensive minded coach, and so they had to go offensive minded, especially for their head coach. And I think they got the right guy in Ben Johnson. And to go back to your question about, do they have the, personnel to be competitive right away? I think on a receiver front, yes. I think
I'll go down the list here for the receivers as you say that. DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and Rome Odunze. Rome Odunze got drafted last year. I love that kid. I thought he deserved to be a first-round draft pick, definitely. And I thought it was a good pick. It didn't really translate. I didn't see a lot from him last year, but I think that he's going to have his second year, especially under Ben Johnson. I think he can have a lot of success. So you have DJ Moore, Allen, Odunze, and at tight end, you got Cole Kmet. So again, you believe that they have the weapons and the wideouts?
Oh, for sure.
Right.
I look at that list, and that's a better wideout list than some other teams have.
Steelers.
Yes. I didn't want to say them. But the depth is there. It has, other than CeeDee Lamb for the Dallas Cowboys, that's also a better wide receiver room than the Dallas Cowboys have.
Mm-hmm.
And so while, I could argue CeeDee Lamb is probably the best wide receiver of those three, but wide receiver 2, 3, 4, and the tight end slot.
Right.
They have decent tight ends, but Chicago has some good wide receivers there, and that tight end, Cole Kmet, I think is an underrated tight end as well. And he was somebody that Caleb could rely on in the first year too. So I think they've got the weapons there. It's all a matter of, can can Caleb Williams continue to develop into the right path? And I think there are the right building blocks in place to do that. Chicago has always been enticing for me when it comes to that, in terms of the way that they could grow. I don't think they're going to go 4-13 the upcoming season at all. I know that division is really, really strong. It's the strongest division in football,
right?
But I think they will make strides to improve next year. I don't know if they'll make the playoffs, but I certainly believe they'll be a team, one of those sleeper teams next year that could be competitive in a lot of their football matchups for sure.
I think you're going to have a lot of less eyes on them next year. I think a lot of people were looking at Caleb Williams to be drafted. When you're drafted that high, the expectations come along with it, right? So it's kind of like everybody was looking at him, and then to go through a coaching change, Eberflus got fired like after Thanksgiving. So
one timeout left. He still has that timeout left from Thanksgiving. He could utilize it at any time if he wanted to.
Man, it's as a rookie quarterback with all these expectations, now you go through that coaching change. I think if you can bring some sort of stability and some good leadership in Ben Johnson, I think they have a chance, like you said, to be a surprise. Again, I don't think they can make the playoffs yet, but I think they have a lot of potential to grow next year, to maybe get to 8 wins, maybe even more. But yeah, I'm excited. I never had a good feeling about the Chicago Bears. It's always like Justin Fields. I feel like, look, I don't think Justin Fields is as good as Caleb Williams. I'll definitely admit that, but I do believe he's better than what we've seen so far, even under Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh. I think they're just not using him the right way. So the point you said about finding people to surround Caleb Williams with, that is going to help him grow into the potential great quarterback that he could be, I'm excited to see that. So yeah, it just worries me, when you got a new quarterback like that with so many expectations, and you kind of waste these first, second, third years with all these trying to find the right fit at coaching and offensive coordinator. Sometimes I see it happen so much, and then you're in your 4th season and you never really got any momentum behind you, and you're already going through a rebuild, and you're like, fuck, like, it's like, I just don't want to see that happen again for the Chicago Bears,
Yeah, that's going to be tough. And look, Chicago with their ownership too, the McCaskies there, that's always going to be a wild card.
Right.
But I just look at them and it's like it will have to come out. It will have to depend at the end of the day of how Caleb Williams goes. But I think the pieces are there, and they are going to be much more competitive. And I think Ben Johnson will, already hearing from the press conference, right? And that's always going to age, however well, with him saying, I enjoy beating Matt LaFleur twice a year.
Right.
And so that's always going to be interesting. But I think that's going to bring a confidence into this team. The players liked him in Detroit, and obviously it's so. I think it's going to work out well. I just really like this hiring from Chicago.
I do too, and I wish nothing but the best to the Chicago Bears franchise. I think their fans deserve a winning franchise, and some have been there for a long time without a winning football team. So nothing but the best for them. Before we get to the AFC and NFC championship game, I want to take a little pit stop into basketball. I've been seeing this story in the recent weeks, and at first it kind of piqued my curiosity because I'm always intrigued by the egos and by those kinds of storylines. Jimmy Butler, I'm not a Miami Heat fan. I don't follow the team, but the story goes, not happy. He gets suspended for 7 games. He goes through the suspension, comes back, plays a couple of games, says something as the effect that he's not happy, he's lost his joy, and then a few days ago misses a flight to Milwaukee, and the team suspends him for another 2 games. So my first impression after the 7-game suspension was, first of all, the 7-game suspension seemed long when it came to for the reason, right? They said it was for conduct detrimental to the team. And I understand if you have a player on your team that shows up doesn't interact with any of his teammates or coaching staff, sits at the end of the bench, or just his body language screams that he doesn't want to be in Miami Heat. He doesn't want to play basketball for that team. It sucks. And it's a huge distraction for a team in the Miami Heat. And you try to have to do all that thing. Now, my first impression, my first reaction to when I heard the story was just shut up and go play basketball. Just shut up, go play basketball. You sign a contract. You're not happy. You're not going to get paid more money by pouting like this and scoring 19 points per game. Like, that's not how you're going to get paid. If you want to get paid, like, you signed your contract, use that. But then, for some reason, the last few days, I started showing a little bit more empathy towards Jimmy Butler, because I remember Jimmy Butler from the 2020 NBA Finals. He put that team on his back and he brought them to the NBA Finals, and everybody made a big deal. This is the Jimmy Butler that we know. This is what his potential was, to be this leader. And then they started telling the backstory about how he struggled coming up as a kid and all the story, and it was all beautiful. And it painted this narrative, this picture of this athlete that was maybe small in stature, overlooked, underdog type, but that if you just give him a chance, he can win you a championship. He almost did. He didn't. And then everything kind of unraveled from there, where it was like just something. So when I started thinking about that, I thought, you know what? Instead of reacting and going like, just fucking shut up and go play basketball. Like, that's what you're paid for. I didn't want to have that reaction. I think it's a bit ignorant sometimes, because as an adult, as a man, sometimes I go through things in my personal life that could affect my athletic life, whatever other thing that I have, from pro wrestling to coaching baseball to all those things. And I try to keep all those emotions separate, because these are important things that I do. And I know that if I let the emotions get to me in those things, that it's not going to help anyone. So I hope that Jimmy Butler is all right. I hope that he's not going through something more serious. I think that if he was, let's say, I don't want to say anything, but let's say it was something more deeply personal than just playing basketball or just wanting to get paid, whether it be something in the mental illness or whatever it is that he's going through, I think that the Miami Heat would be behind him and willing to try to help him instead of trying to trade him. So, which leads me to believe that at the end of the day, it's as much empathy I want to show towards Jimmy Butler because of his past accomplishments. It seems like he's not getting his way, and this is his way, finding a way out of Miami to go play for a team where he thinks he might win a championship, or where he thinks he'll get paid what he thinks he's worth. What's your thought on the whole matter?
Yeah, it's been something interesting to follow. Just it's more of a far for me, because like what you said, I'm not somebody that follows too closely the Miami Heat or, how they're doing this season, but this has been a story that's been dominating the headlines in the NBA for a few weeks now. And for me, I just look at it all. It reminds me so much, way back in the day for me as an Ottawa Senators fan, and Danny Heatley demanding a trade out of Ottawa in late 2000s, 2008.
Wow.
And,
I remember that.
And that being a whole deal, because he had it's very similar. He just signed a contract with the team, coming off a career year with the team. The jokes about it still today about 50-07 for Danny Heatley, right? And then all of a sudden it seemed like, things had deteriorated, and now he wants out of Ottawa. And then there was a proposal that he would go to Edmonton, and it sounded like a trade was done, and it seemed like he was open to going to Edmonton. Then he said, no, I'm not waiving my no trade clause to go to Edmonton, and it just became an ongoing saga, finally with Heatley going to San Jose. And the reason why I bring it up is just there's so many similarities I see, where we didn't know at the time why Danny Heatley wanted to leave. He was very just to himself and said, I don't want to, be here anymore. I want to go somewhere else. And at the time, as a Sens fan, you listen to all that, you think, oh, you just signed a contract.
Right.
You're having some of your best team, years here. You went to a Stanley Cup with the Ottawa Senators, a few years ago. this has been some career years, and now you're leaving. You're not, giving the Sens fans, reason for why you want to go. And I think over time, it's come out that the coach at the time, Corey Clouston, and Heatley didn't get along, and he just felt like his role was diminishing with the Sens, and he didn't feel like he was going to be productive. And he just decided, you know what, this is time. It's time for me to go, and this is how I am going to exit. And so it's one of those things now that as we get more open about players' thoughts and how they're feeling on teams. And I think what you mentioned there with Jimmy Butler is interesting. Like, what's kind of the mental space he's in? Obviously, we don't want to speculate what he's got.
Right. Like absolutely.
That. But, it always makes it more interesting, right? Like, is he just not getting along with the coach there? I remember there was also some talk about Pat Riley and just how he's more of an old school minded coach. And he's obviously had so much success in the NBA, with the Lakers back in the 80s with Magic Johnson, and then, transitioning to the Heat with Dwayne Wade. And so is he somebody that's just kind of set in his ways? And he said, look, we're going to honor you to your contract and you're going to stay here. We paid you all this money so that you could be our superstar
right
here in Miami, and we've got this core around you. It's interesting. I do wonder if it is a state of just, I'm not happy here anymore. What I thought was a good system for me is no longer a system. And like what you mentioned with Jimmy Butler, the guy's getting paid that much and he's, averaging 19 points a game.
Right.
Like that's, if you're not bad in the NBA, but in terms of what they're paying him to be a superstar athlete, like you want to be averaging like 25 points a game, higher, average more rebounds, average more assists, obviously.
Right.
So I think this is something I eventually see Jimmy Butler getting traded. You can't just keep somebody like that who's unhappy in your system for that long. And
rumors
I think eventually the value
is that it'll be done by Sunday. Like, we're Saturday recording this right now. The rumor is that by Sunday there should be a deal. I think the hiccup is that he wants to go to Phoenix, but Phoenix aren't able to give up what the Heat wants, so they have to start involving other teams, which is something that happens a lot in basketball, right? You got to start involving 3 teams to get one deal done. It gets complicated. It takes a long time. Everybody wants maximize as much as possible. But yeah, it's every time I hear a story like that kind of takes the it's not about the game as much as why is he like. I immediately go to like, is there something more? Maybe it is just a bad relationship, right? Absolutely. At the end of the day, maybe we'll never find out what it is, maybe down the road. But as of for now, it's all speculation. And you're just trying to make sense out of this. I think Jimmy Butler can still be. I remember the narrative being, the storyline being in the day when he was going from team to team, when he had with the 76ers for 1 year, then he went to the Heat, was, can Jimmy Butler win a championship if he's the best player on your team, right? I never thought, and that's not saying I'm not a Jimmy Butler fan. He's a good player, good player. But I don't think if he's the best player on your team, I don't think you're winning a championship. I think he's a good number 2 maybe, behind a superstar, but he's not 25 anymore. He's been in the league for a long time. So now you're looking for an extension for how many more years? Maybe there'll be a team that's willing to take the chance and say, well, maybe if we bring him in, it'll take us over the hump. I don't think the Phoenix Suns are that team, unfortunately, but again, maybe it is, maybe they are, and maybe they, bring him in and they surprise everything. But it wasn't mostly, I wanted to bring it up. Like, I think the discussion we had is perfect. I didn't really want to bring it up for the trade talk. I just wanted to get your perspective on how it is as someone that's seen a lot of sports from ALD. And it's the example you gave with Danny Heatley. I completely forgot about that. Again, that was a long time ago. Now that you mention it, there's a lot of similarities. There's a lot of like, who knows, and a deal will most likely get done, which is like, holy shit. And then you'll be like, okay. And then within 3 days after the deal is done, he'll play his first game with his new team, and then it'll all be forgotten. And maybe in a few years, we'll find out really what happened.
You'll get the occasional game, obviously, where first time he arrives back in, Miami, and then you'll get the boo birds there because that
Right.
inevitably will happen. Absence makes the heart grow fonder, and also time heals all wounds.
Right.
And so, like, if you would have told me even 5 years ago that, going back to that Heatley example, that he would eventually be honored by the Ottawa Senators in a ceremony, I would have
Right.
thought you would be crazy because of the way that he left the team. But they did that recently. They brought back Danny Heatley. They had the old Alfredson and Spezza line together. Daniel Alfredson and Jason Spezza were in attendance to honor Danny Heatley, and even going back to the NBA, Vince Carter. The way that he left in Toronto, and they
Right.
had the big ceremony for his jersey retirement. And I still feel like there's some wounds there, but that's, I think, a story for another day. But I think for the majority of the fan base, like, being able to see Vince Carter back out there being embraced once again, I think it's one of those things that time can heal some wounds. And at that point, Carter was out of the league he had retired. He's out of the league, went to join the Basketball Hall of Fame.
Right.
And so that's how I kind of see those similarities there, where I think eventually you're going to see, like, 10, 15 years down the line, you're going to see, like, Miami Heat fans be like, oh, remember when Jimmy Butler got us to, the NBA finals that one year just during the pandemic, and Tyler Hero was on those squads. Like, we'll be doing the reminiscing, and we'll be nostalgic. But I think right now it's one of those, what's going on here? Why are we doing this? Why, like, there's a lot of why that's being asked when it comes to Jimmy Butler.
Yeah, it seems to be all for, like, I feel like it would be a lot more important if the Heats were a contender, or right, like, maybe this wouldn't even be going on if they were a contender, if they were winning more basketball games. But I always find it interesting when these types of storylines show up, and my only worry about all this is that it seems to be a little bit more prevalent in a game like basketball, where guys that are unhappy can easily just be disgruntled and stop playing and then get traded. I feel like it's like, what are you going to do? Just trade them. I feel like whoever was the first person to set that precedent of, like, oh yeah, disgruntled, trade them. Then people are like, yeah, I'm not happy here anymore. I'll just act like I'm not happy, and then they'll just trade me. And I see that a lot, and I feel that's not how I would ever choose to play any game I play. Like, I'm loyal, and if I make a commitment, I try to honor that commitment with everything I can, no matter how unhappy or happy I am. So, but that's just me. I don't know all the ins and outs. It's probably so much more complicated that we even know that at the end of the day, with all the information that we know, again, everything's okay on his personal side, that it's really just business, and he just wants to go play for a contender and win a championship or get paid. So that's all we could hope for. Moving on to the big, storyline of the week, NFL, AFC, NFC championship games. Two huge games. Commanders versus Eagles, and the Bills versus the Chiefs. I want to start with the Commanders and the Eagles because I feel like we all know what the storyline is with the Bills and the Chiefs. It's what everybody seems to be talking about. But I am very, very intrigued with this Commanders-Eagles game. Obviously, the storyline of Jalen Hurts injuring himself last week in the third quarter against the Rams. He didn't really practice, I think, this week. I think we're at a time of year in the NFL where a lot of guys don't practice. I think it's like they're just trying to tape these guys together and get them to the field, because I'm sure a lot of them are broken, like really broken. We all know the mental fortitude of these football players, but it's intriguing, and it adds to the storyline that Jalen Hurts is not 100%. But here's my point. I don't think they need him. Saquon Barkley is simply been on a tear. And I'm going to bring up a few points here. Commanders gave up 201 notes are gone against the Lions. 105 rushing yards for Gibbs and 101 rushing yards to the Bucks. They were ranked 30th this season in rush defense. The obvious question to that is, can they limit Saquon Barkley. What are your thoughts on that?
In terms of the Commanders and limiting Saquon Barkley, they will not. I'm fairly confident on that. As you mentioned, I think Saquon Barkley has just been on another level. He's it was just recently announced who are some of the nominees for the MVP and the Offensive Player of the Year award. Saquon Barkley was one of the names on that list, and for good reason. He is really the engine that runs for this Eagles offense, literally. He just finds ways to create plays. Like, he'll even jump backwards to go, get by a player if need be. Just some of the stuff that he's been able to do this year has been on another level. And this Commander squad has certainly surprised a lot of people, certainly surprised me. I think this has been a great story for the NFL as well.
Absolutely.
New ownership coming in, and you get Dan Quinn as well. You got Jaden Daniels, and it seems like they've got Dan Quinn has got his guys locked in, and they're going in and like, obviously any team, they're like, oh, if you're a game away from the Super Bowl, you're going in. It's like, I'm going to go win the Super Bowl. But
absolutely.
But I think if the Commanders lost, I don't think anybody would be like, oh, what a terrible season for the Washington Commanders. I think they have firmly exceeded all expectations. And I think what they've been able to do against a team like the Lions, going blow for blow in that awesome game last weekend, it was just a really fun game to watch. Fireworks everywhere, touchdowns everywhere, and the Commanders really taking it to Detroit. And so, but like what you mentioned, that rush defense that Washington has, it's tough. You got to be much better than that against this Eagles squad with Saquon Barkley. And I don't think they'll be able to do that. If they weren't able to stop the running backs, as you mentioned, for Tampa Bay or for Detroit, you mentioned with Jahmyr Gibbs, 101 rushing yards. So I can't, if they're letting 100 yards, and those are good running backs they got there, and Bucky Irving and Jahmyr Gibbs, but Saquon Barkley's on a different level. And even then, like the receivers for the Philadelphia Eagles, I'm fairly confident the Eagles are going to win in this NFC Championship game. I think it'll be a fight, because not only is it a match to get you to a Super Bowl, but it's also a divisional match. And as a Cowboys fan, it makes me sick to my absolute stomach having to watch this tomorrow. But and the fact that I have to give any sort of praise for these teams makes me sick. But nonetheless, I got to go Eagles here. I think this Commander squad has been a great story going in. I think Jaden Daniels has been cementing himself as a guy to watch in the NFL that could be one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL for years to come. And he's got this swagger on top of it as well, and this confidence in a rookie quarterback that you don't usually see. That's what's helped this Washington team get to this next level. And they've got some good players there, but I'm picking Philly to beat the Commanders tomorrow.
Yeah, I think the Eagles are going to exploit the Commanders, and they're going to run the ball, and they're going to control possession the whole game. I mean, Jalen Hurts is a great player, but sustaining a knee injury like that late in the season, when I think he's been injured, correct me if I'm wrong, but he's been injured earlier in the season as well. I believe he missed some games, right?
He was injured even into the end of the season as well.
Right.
They had to put in their backup there.
That's
Kenny
right.
Pickett.
He was concussed, I believe, at the end of the season, right? Look, I think Saquon's going to have the Commanders are going to have a hard time stopping Saquon. I think I'm pretty comfortable saying that. The important question is, can Jaden Daniels also overcome the Eagles defense? Like, Jalen Carter on the Eagles defense is a beast, and he's had some great games in recent weeks. They were ranked number 1 pass defense this season, 2024, 10th in rush defense. Now, granted, they allowed 325 passing yards last week to Stafford. But ultimately, I believe the Eagles' defense is going to be able to limit Jaden Daniels in the scrambles. I think that's also important. Jaden Daniels is good on his feet. He can scramble when the play breaks down. And when he gets under pressure, I think that the Eagles will be good enough to limit his yardage and his ability to gain positive yardage. I think Eagles 27, Commanders 20. I think it's going to be a good game. I think the Eagles are going to take this one, and then Saquon is going to rush for, I'll say, about 185 yards plus.
Wow, there you go.
Yeah, I
don't even think that's far off either. The way that Saquon has been playing, and one of the things too that Washington will have to go up against with Jane Daniels is that one of the reasons why Jane Daniels and the Commanders were able to win against Detroit is that defense in Detroit was just pummeled with injuries.
Right.
And they didn't have all their guys out there. And so that's why they were able to go toe to toe. And so the Eagles don't have to worry about that. They've got a lot of their guys on there still on their defense. So Jane Daniels is going against a pretty top level defense. So
absolutely,
I think that's going to affect them too. If I have to give a score, I would say the score is going to be Eagles 24. I'm going to say Commanders 17.
Right.
I think it will be a touchdown that the Eagles will win.
Yeah, I was going to do a field goal, but I don't think they're going to keep it. I think they're going to fall behind early in the game, and they're going to. I think the Eagles are going to control the tempo in the first half with the running game, and they're going to control the ball a lot more. And I think they're going to come firing in the second half, but I think it'll be a little bit too late for the Commanders, and they won't be able to get through that Eagles defense. So, but I'm really hyped for that game. I'm not a really big Eagles fan, I'll be honest, and I don't really like watching a lot of their games. I don't know why. I'm just not interested in them, but
I agree wholeheartedly.
Right, as a Cowboys fan. But what I saw from Jaden Daniels this season and the Commanders, I'm really happy for that franchise. They have some good wide receivers, good weapons. The composure he's able to keep in as a rookie year is insane. And I was reading an article, I don't know, maybe you saw this, but apparently he kind of trains his brain with these VR goggles where he plays football at 1.75 times the speed. So it's quicker in the VR goggles. So that's apparently how he's able to keep his composure during the game, because it slows the game down for him, because he speeds it up on purpose when he has the VR goggles in. Yeah, I found that interesting, because if you watch him play, he stays composed. He's like, when he feels pressured, and you can tell he makes really, really smart decisions. I'm happy for him. I'm happy for the franchise. Huge fan. I hope he has a lot of success. But again, I'm picking the Eagles with this one.
I agree. And it was funny too, before he moved to the next game,
right,
I saw an article or some talk that apparently Dan Snyder, the former owner of the Commanders, is quote unquote fucking pissed.
Yeah, I saw that too. I saw that too.
Awesome. That was so great. That made my day when I read that. Yeah, I'm glad that he's sitting there, because talk about a guy that ruined a franchise.
Absolutely.
Like 20 years down the drain for Snyder. So I'm glad to see that he's wallowing in some shame, having to see that literally the first year that he's gone, his team is going to the conference championship.
I think it's a perfect example of the type of leadership that you need, like shitty owners. It reminds me of, remember how much the Bengals used to be so horrible before they drafted Joe Burrow, right? It was like, are they ever going to be able to win? Like, they would go through these seasons like, holy shit. Like, we're not even winning one football game, or winning 1 or 2 football games year after year. I was like, imagine being drafted to that team and you're like, I got to go play for these guys. Like, wow, that sucks. Because after a while, you tell yourself, you go, this franchise is not trying to win. It's a business. As long as they're making money, they don't give a shit that they're losing, because they're still making money. So it sucks. But when you find owners that are passionate about not only making money, but winning, then you see the potential. And it's the transformation from one year to the next for the Commanders that's why I fell in love with that team right now. So good for them. The next game, Bills versus Chiefs. Now, before I get into it, let me fix my camera.
Yeah, no problem.
Bills, Chiefs. Man, can Josh Allen slay the giant that is Patrick Mahomes? Mahomes is 3-0 against Allen's in the playoffs. Can he make it 4-0 this Sunday? Man, I've been back and forth during this game, because every part of me is telling me, is screaming at me, don't do it. Don't pick against Mahomes. Just don't do it. Just Chiefs all the way. And I'm like, yes, absolutely. And then I go, but Josh Allen. They've been doing great. James Cook's been running the ball. And if there's one weakness on the Chiefs defense is their running defense. So I'm like, are they going to run the ball? If Buffalo Bill going to run the ball so that they can control possession to try to keep Mahomes on the sideline for as long as possible and force Mahomes to stretch the field because he knows he's not going to get as many chances maybe that he usually would get if the Bills are successful at establishing a strong running game. They ran the ball 36 times for 147 yards and 44 times for 210 yards versus the Ravens and the Broncos, respectively. I mean, the Chiefs have Steve Spagnuolo. What's his Spagnuolo, right? Spagnuolo. Yeah. I have a hard time with that name. He's won 4 Super Bowl as a defensive coordinator. So you know the Chiefs are going to come as prepared as they can be. But the Bills' running game can control and change everything, in my opinion, here. If they're able to establish that strong ground game, control the ball, and keep the blitz-happy Chiefs honest, and giving more time to Josh Allen because he won't have as much pressure. I think there's a lot of factor there that depends on the Bills establishing the running game. But at the end of the day, as much as I want to pick the Bills, as much as I want to go, yes, they will establish a running game. Yes, all of that. I'm going to go with the Bills. Again, I'm undecided. I have Bills 24, Chiefs 21 here, and I wrote that. So I'm going to stick with that. So I'm actually going to stick with the Bills, but I was about to change my mind. I was going to go Chiefs 27, Bills 24, but I'm going to stick with the Bills 24, Chiefs 21. I think the Bills get over the hump here and make it to the Super Bowl. Your thoughts?
Man, these matchups are always so much fun, the Bills and Chiefs. And maybe not fun for Bills fans, considering the results of the last 3 matchups in the playoffs. But as a fan of football, it's just, like, I think it's safe to say this has already eclipsed Manning Brady when it comes to, QB one-on-one matchups in the NFL. And I'm excited from that standpoint that we're going to see, a rivalry here, and this is something that it's been one-sided for the Chiefs for the longest time, and there's been different ways that the Bills have lost, whether it be their own version of wide right, the modern day wide right, or the coin toss, or just the different ways that they've lost, or a classic Mahomes comeback. But this is now the 4th matchup of the playoffs for the Bills and the Chiefs, 1 game away, and I look at both of these squads, and I look at this Chiefs team that it's still not 100% there in terms of, compared to years past. This is not the best Chiefs team we've seen.
We said that last year.
I know, right? And yet they were able to go through and win the Super Bowl, right? That's also one of the things that stick with me because it's just they find ways to win.
And I'm sure, I know they're not as good.
All the Bills fans are yelling. They're saying the officials are helping the Chiefs win and all this, and that's a whole other discussion point. I'm sure Texans fans are also not happy about that from the game as well. I'll say this: I did not think it was a
roughing the passer.
Roughing the passer. No. I certainly didn't think that.
I believe that Mahomes knows that he gets the call, and I believe that they practice. I might be wrong about this, but I think he entices the way sometimes to get those calls on roughing the passer.
Absolutely. You look at the way that he runs out of bounds.
Right.
Like he's very deliberate with the step out of bounds to make sure that, especially when a defender's coming on him, to make sure that he's making sure he's getting out of bounds when he gets hit.
Right.
Right. Because then the official's going to say, oh, he's getting hit while he's out of bounds and blah, blah, blah. So he knows how it works.
Absolutely.
He knows how it's all being done. And Andy Reid's no dummy. Like, he knows this. He's been in the game for so long. I think there is, in a way, some smart things that they're doing to try and get those calls because they know that they're going to get the benefit of those calls.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at it and I look at this Bills team and it just feels like Josh Allen is on this other level right now where it feels like he's going to win MVP.
Right.
It feels like he's just been carrying this team on his back. He's making sure that this team gets to the next round and continuing on, and He's got the receivers. He's got Amari Cooper there, and James Cook. You mentioned that ground game has just been so strong for them, and their defenses have always been strong. Von Miller seems like an ageless wonder. He's still out there playing at a high level for them, and I look at it all and I'm thinking, I shouldn't.
Right. No,
I shouldn't.
I know.
But I'm gonna do it.
You're gonna do it.
I'm gonna do it. We're gonna go Bills. Go Bills.
Go Bills. Let's
go
fucking
Bills.
go Bills.
I'm picking the Bills. I am also gonna have them winning by a field goal.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have them winning 20-16 in their matchup. Go Bills.
Go Bills. It will be definitely an interesting game. My wife, who is not by any means a football fan until recently, she immediately became a Chiefs fan because that's how she got into football, was because of the Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift storyline. And she kind of started trolling me about it because she saw how it was making me boil every time I'd see Taylor Swift on that'd be like I just like, so it's definitely going to be interesting. I'm definitely rooting for the Bills just to annoy my wife. But yeah, look, no matter who we pick here, like, I'm not going to eat shit if the Chiefs win. It's like, I think this is a coin flip. I think it was a coin flip the previous years as well. I think Josh Allen versus Mahomes is the biggest rivalry in the sport right now. And if I look at as a franchise, I think the Bills could really, really use this to get over the hump and to make it to a Super Bowl. I don't think it's going to define Josh Allen's career, but I think he needs a championship. I think he deserves one. I think he's a good football player. And I think, again, it's just going to be one of those games where you're like, you shouldn't be rooting against the Chiefs because they've proved us wrong. They proved us wrong last year, and now they're proving us wrong again. Like, they played a great game last week. Like, Kelce, all of a sudden, he's the Kelce of old, 100+ yards, and he's back, touchdown, and he's happy, he's dancing, and you're like, fuck, I hate seeing that. I hate seeing that because I know what that means. I'm like, I'm going to see the Chiefs in the Super Bowl so I'm like, but I'm going to go with the Bills. I'm going to root for the Bills. Hopefully they can get over the hump and get to the Super Bowl. So it'll be a Bills versus Eagles if I get my way, I guess. Super Bowl, which that'll be an interesting game. So let's go Bills.
Go Bills, Stefan. Go Bills.
Topic of choice. We do this every episode. Topic or rant of choice. Before I let you get to your topic of choice, I think we all know what it is with the recent hire of the Dallas Cowboys. Before we get there, I just want to take a few minutes to acknowledge TGL. Have you heard of this? It's this new team golf league that's been on ESPN. It's indoors. It's all these pros. It is connected to the PGA Tour. So they have this simulated game indoors with fans. So they hit. It's amazing because so they drive the ball against this big screen, right? It's like simulation golf. And they have teams of 3. Tiger Woods was there last week or the week before. Like, they have all guys on the PGA Tours, all pro golfers. And they're all mic'd up. They're talking shit the whole time. And they drive in this screen. And so as long as they're in the fairway, they're driving against the screen. So they're playing these 500, 600-yard holes. First couple of shots is against the green. And where they're teeing off, there's a sand pit. So if you're in the rough, like, it's all sorts. And then when it comes down to putting, they have this green that changes for every hole.
Okay.
Underneath the green are these pistons that go up and down. So virtually you see what the green is supposed to be, and it moves everything. And around the green, there's sand traps and all that stuff. Fucking interesting. I don't watch golf at all on TV. I don't follow golf. I couldn't tell you who's the best golf player since Tiger Woods. All that. I followed it a little bit when Tiger Woods was hot, but I don't follow golf. I don't play it. It doesn't interest me. But for some reason, adding the team dynamic and having them mic'd up and just talking through the game and talking shit and having fun and having the fans be the music and it's like it's a vibe. and I'm really, really interested. It's always on. I catch it. I think it was on. I forget when it's on. But honestly, if you haven't watched it, TGL, give it a watch. I started following them on Instagram. It's a good follow. It's making me a fan of the game. I don't think it's going to translate in me sitting down during the summer and watching golf because I'm just too busy with other shit for the most part. But TGL, check it out. Anybody listening to this, if you're a golf fan, I'm sure you've heard of it. If you're not, maybe this is the thing to get you into golf, because honestly, like, if there's nothing else on TV, I just sit there and I watch them, and it's really, really interesting.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I've not heard of it. The thing with golf is, like, so I do watch the majors when I can. Mm-hmm. I usually watch the Masters or the US Open or the British Open. I've not like too locked in recent years, but during the 2010s, like, you know, obviously Tiger is, you know, everybody knows who Tiger Woods is, but like I would try and follow along with your Rory McIlroys,
right?
And, you know, Ricky Fowlers and, you know, Phil Mickelson, obviously. So, and then everything that happened with that live golf stuff,
right?
Kind of, and now it kind of merging. It's kind of left me thinking, oh, I don't know, but I'll give that a look because that sounds very unique. That's something that, like, golf. One of the things that golf has needed to do is try and, you know, captivate a younger audience,
right?
To try and get that base, and that sounds something that could be interesting to try and, you know, navigate that as they try to seek out that fan base and get that next generation of golfers going for them.
I'm noticing this trend. Do you remember the movie? Oh, what was the movie? Oh, I fucking forget the movie. It was Arnold. It was a Schwarzenegger movie, and he was like, it was about cloning. Do you remember that? It was the sixth day. Is that what it's called?
I don't think that. Oh, what was it called? I know the movie that you're talking about.
Right, the XFL was in that movie. It was in the future. Do you remember?
Right.
The quarterback gets killed during the game and they just clone him. And I'm pretty sure it's the sixth day, but it doesn't matter. Do you remember how the XFL looks in that movie? It's like very futuristic and all that stuff. I feel like sports is heading in a direction where it has to merge with technology more and more in order to keep the younger fan base, because it's so immersed with technology. And I think that TGL is a perfect example of the direction any sport is heading. We'll most likely see it in football, some sort of immersion with technology and stuff. So I'm really, really, really intrigued about it. And TGL is a perfect example of something that I had no interest in. Now I'm like, this is interesting.
Right.
Floor's yours, my friend. Floor's yours. I'm curious about this because honestly, I don't know if I couldn't tell by your expression earlier if you're happy about this or if you're not happy.
I'm not.
Okay. Not. That's what I thought. I thought he doesn't look happy, but maybe I don't. Maybe that's just.
This is a very held in me right now. That's just trying to like. I saw it break last night, and all my friends are texting me. He's like, "Oh, you see this?" It's like, I've only seen this for the 11th time now. You're the 11th person to share me the news. That's yes, Brian Schottenheimer is the new head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, a candidate who was not being interviewed by other teams to be their head coach, and who was our offensive coordinator this past year, and yet did not call any plays for the team. I am so excited to have Brian Schottenheimer as our new coach. You know, I mean, they already screwed up the whole process with Mike McCarthy. You know, I was one of the guys that didn't hate Mike McCarthy as much as other people did.
Right.
I didn't think Mike McCarthy was as bad. I thought he had to deal with a roster that did not have the depth that it should have had. Like, on the surface, like, Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, Micah Parsons. And then you actually look deeper into this roster, it's like, there's not much depth here in terms of what's underneath. Like, you look at the receivers mentioned earlier, like, you got Brandon Cooks, which, you know, in 2018, I would have been excited about Brandon Cooks, but he's not been that same wide receiver too. He's been fine, but he's not been at the level that they've been hoping for. And then you look below that, and it's guys that they're trying to develop at wide receiver. And so I see all of that. And then obviously the running back situation, Jerry Jones has the great idea to bring in Ezekiel Elliott as our, lead running back, and not realizing, hey, we've got a guy in Rico Dowdle that we should probably let blossom. And they eventually figured it out during the season. He got 1,000 yards this season, so I am excited to see where he goes from there. But didn't have the greatest start. But all that to say, I did not think Mike McCarthy was the problem in Dallas. I thought he was coaching with not a lot of resources there. Shockingly for Dallas, not a lot of talent to work with. And then once Dak got injured, it was going to be tough sledding from there. And so the fact that he was able to get Cooper Rush, the Cowboys, to be even in a position to be talked about for a playoff spot, before a few weeks before the end of the season, I think that means something. Again, I'm not saying that this guy was an otherworldly coach and like a Hall of Fame coach, but I didn't think he was as bad as people made him out to be. So, of course, he's in the final year of his deal. Like they said, we're just going to run this last year of his deal and go from there. So he's running under the assumption that, hey, maybe I'll get extended this year. I don't know. But there's no stability there. They then, kick the stones on the ground and they waddle away. They think, maybe we'll look into it. I don't know, blah, blah, blah. And then they miss a week of potential candidate interviews that they could have done. And then I'm thinking, oh, well, they're bringing back McCarthy, so it makes sense that they're going to do that. And then, lo and behold, they couldn't come to an agreement because they didn't want to go long-term with McCarthy. And so McCarthy said, no, I'm stopping these negotiations. I'm going to leave because you're not going to give me a long-term deal because that's what I thought you were keeping me on as.
Right.
So they waste a week of not doing coaching interviews, and they lose the coach that they wanted because they were not willing to give the long-term extension. And so now they're left scrambling. And so they go and they interview Leslie Frazier, they interview Robert Saleh, and they interview Kellen Moore. Those are the three coaches that they interviewed. And no Ben Johnson, no Aaron Glenn, no Joe Brady from the Bills, none of the Liam Cohen, none of those guys. They all of their connection is that they have some sort of connection to Jerry Jones and being with the squad in the past. And so it's like, okay, well, I guess we're going to go back to Kellen Moore as the head coach because he seemed like the favorite. And then lurking in the shadows was an unsung candidate that was rising through the ranks and that was well-liked in the building. And Jerry likes him a lot. And his name, Savage, is Brian Schottenheimer. He's somebody that is well-liked by the players, and he brings a stability.
Is that the story thing right now?
I'm setting the stage. I'm telling you how the reporting went. It's like, oh, and they start saying, oh, he might be a candidate to look out for. He might be somebody to keep an eye on, and you think nothing of it, right? Because why would you bring on a candidate who didn't call plays as the offensive coordinator this past year and has not called plays in the NFL since the 2010s for Seattle, I believe, when he was calling for Russell Wilson? And all the times he was the offensive coordinator, he was not exactly number one when it came to offense on the offensive coordinator. And at no point had interviews to be a head coach during his entire time, despite having the last name of Schottenheimer. His father is Marty Schottenheimer. You would think at one point someone would interview him, say, hey, you want to be the head coach? But no, That has not happened. And so I'm thinking, I don't think nothing much of this. I don't think this is happening. I'm thinking, oh, it's just, they're talking about it. They're just doing their interviews. They're looking within the staff. And what do I read on this Friday night? That Brian Schottenheimer is our new head coach. Just talk about a comfort hire. Talk about a guy that I've never, as a Cowboys fan, you could call it delusion. You could call it naivety, whatever. I had not, at this point, felt less confident about how the Cowboys will do this upcoming season. It just screams comfort hire and somebody that's willing to do the bidding of what Jerry Jones wants to do. And Jerry Jones wants to play it safe and just go with the guy that he knows in the building. And that was the whole hiring process, is a guy that interviewing people that had a connection to the Cowboys. And we got Brian Schottenheimer as our new head coach. I mean, you want me to get excited for this? What am I supposed to say? Like, people are texting me, Savage, and telling me, it's like, oh, what do you think? What do you think? What do you want me to think? You want me to like it? You want me to tell you all that I like this?
Everybody's expecting you to answer, like, why, right? As a fan, they're probably like, oh, you'll probably know why.
I don't know why. I want to know why.
It's
Well, it's a
honestly,
comfort hire. That's why.
you're right.
He'll do what Jerry wants him to do. That's why.
I have to agree with you, everything you said. I have to, because you know more about this than I do, honestly. Like, it definitely seems and feels like a comfort hire. Like one of those, like, we just need to know someone that knows the ins and out of the organization that's been here, and let's pick you. I feel bad because I don't feel like it's showing the superstar players, the Dak Prescott's, the CeeDee Lamb, like you're trying to install this winning culture here in Dallas, right? It's like you're the fucking Dallas Cowboys, right? Like, the fact it's definitely mismanaged, which is, when something is mismanaged, you go, okay, well, maybe it's a mistake, it happens, who fucking knows. But when it seems to repeat itself over and over, it's like, Jesus Christ, like, it's just mismanaged from the top, and there's nothing you could do, right? This is Jerry Jones' team. That's his team. It's his, and I feel bad.
I can't believe that I am now wanting Deion Sanders as my head coach.
Right.
That is the level I'm at right now. Like it started with Deion Sanders and the rumors that he was being talked about. And apparently it was just like a phone call that Jerry had with Deion. And Deion said I'd be open to it. But it sounded more like Deion was trying to leverage so that he could try to get some more money for his Colorado Buffaloes squad.
Absolutely.
So that he could do some more NIL stuff and recruiting, which makes sense. But it's like I went from, okay, I don't really want Deion, but it sure would make it interesting throughout the season. Like, I think we mentioned it before, but like, you want to talk about cameras on the Cowboys now? Like, imagine throwing in a Deion Sanders. And then it became, Kellen Moore is probably the favorite. It's like, well, I guess we'll go back to Kellen. He was the previous offensive coordinator, now the offensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Right.
And I guess we'll just go back to the previous offensive coordinator, and he was somebody that was touted as a potential future head coach. I'm not exactly overly enthused about it, but I could deal with it. To now it's Brian Schottenheimer, which I don't know what he's like. I assume he's just going to do the same playbook that Mike McCarthy brought in.
Right.
Like, but I don't know. He hasn't called plays in like 5 years. Like, what am I supposed to do? So this is tough sledding right now as a Cowboys fan. I know a lot of fans are, I shouldn't say fans, haters of the Cowboys are probably absolutely loving this right now, and are dancing on whatever's left of hope that I have on this Cowboys team. But I thought that, like, with Jerry getting older, that I thought it would be the opposite. I thought he'd get more desperate. And then he would like hire Deion Sanders. So there's like, I need one more Super Bowl.
Right.
82 or out 83. I need the flashy hire, but it's been the opposite. Now it's like, I'm just going to play it safe and you were talking. It was funny. I was thinking of cutting in, but it's like, I'll be a little too much Cowboys talk. I'll save it for the end. But you were talking about with the Bengals. It's like, they seem like a team that just seems like they're just going to cash the money that comes in.
Absolutely.
They're not committed to winning. And I was like holding it, and I was like, it sounds like the Dallas Cowboys right now.
And that in itself for me is what's surprising, right? It's like I could see certain franchises doing that, but the Dallas Cowboys, they're America's team, right? They're the Dallas Cowboys. So again, I feel for you as a fan, but it's just, again, it doesn't make any sense. But again, we're not experts. We're just here giving our opinions, right? But again, I think we've seen the story play in the past, and we kind of know what the results are here. But again, we might be surprised. Who knows? Anything else you want to add?
Beginning of the year. Watch beginning of the year. I'll probably change my tune and be like, you know what? I kind of overreacted a little bit at the start. Everything's fine.
Right.
And then, the 0-4 start will happen, and then I'll be like, oh no, back to retcon 5. Like, we are doomed. We are blow it up. Who knows? But at the end of it all, people would ask me about the Schottenheimer stuff, and I was like, well, perfect time. I'm going to be going on recording with you, give the thoughts on here. But I mean, it just seems like a comfort hire, and he's apparently well liked in the building. Awesome. I mean, great. I'm glad they like him. But it's got to inspire a lot more. It'd be one thing if it was like, the Cowboys are coming off multiple seasons where it's like they may not have won a Super Bowl, but they went to a Super Bowl and they went to a couple of conference championships, and then Schottenheimer gets hired, and then it's like, oh, well, that's a risky pick, right? Like, he hasn't done this and this, but the culture that they have there. Like, it's like, okay, let's see what he's got. Right. That'd be one thing. But we've accomplished absolutely jack diddly squat in the last 5 years. So you expect me to be confident in this pick? Like, I'm just gonna go along and be like, oh yeah, Jerry, that's a great pick. Awesome. But I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens. But right now, I am just in a state of disarray. I don't know what's gonna happen next. And I could only, and by the way, Matt Eberflus, the guy who didn't call a timeout, he still has that timeout. He's now coming to the Cowboys. It sounds like he's going to be the new defensive coordinator, which is like, I mean, apparently, and and guess what? He was on the Cowboys staff during the Twins when Jason Garrett was the head coach. He was like a defensive special assistant. So of course he has that connection because Jerry likes that. He likes guys that have been in the buildings. So now he's going to be the new defensive coordinator. And I don't think he'll be I don't know. He might not be bad.
I love getting an insight from a Dallas Cowboys fan. It's the first. I have other friends that are Dallas, but I never got this insight from a Dallas Cowboys fan. It gives me a little bit of hope as a Steelers fan for right now.
Yeah, this is everything going on in the Star that at least that I'm aware of. Just from listening to the radio shows. By the way, the radio shows have been a lot of fun to listen to. Of callers just calling in. It's classic sports radio, right? So. I just you're getting kind of a sports radio caller moment right now,
right?
With my Cowboys, but
first time caller, long time listener right here, Zach McGibbon.
I'll hang up and listen now at this and let you go.
Zach, thanks again for doing this. It was a great episode. I'm glad we got to talk all sorts of sports, including your Dallas Cowboys. If you're still listening at this point, thanks along for joining the ride, tagging along for the ride. Subscribe SVG TV on YouTube, Blue Collar Sports. Thanks again. I'll talk to you soon.